Good morning and welcome to our debut episode of Admit One. I am your host, Jonathan Kubiak. Later today, we will be joined by two students from today's featured college, Notre Dame University. Before we get to that though, we'll be bringing you inside the latest headlines in the world of college admissions and higher education. Starting with today's quote, 1,500,000. That is the difference in current United States college enrollment compared to just 5 years ago. According to the Wall Street Journal, male students account for nearly 3/4 of that total decline. The National University of Singapore recently announced that it will establish an interim, quote, new college, end quote, in place of the embattled Yale NUS program, which is slated to be closed at the conclusion of the 2025 academic year. This new institution will not bear Yale's name, but will preserve existing staff and faculty from the Ivy League school's current overseas venture. Although Yale NUS will be shutting their doors after their class of 2025 graduates, Ivy League rival Dartmouth College seems to be opening their own wider than ever before. With 1,229 incoming Big Green students, the graduating class of 2025 will be the largest in Dartmouth's 251-year history. Traditionally the smallest of the Ivies, Dartmouth attributes the increased class size to greater numbers of students deferring their matriculation as a result of the ongoing pandemic. That's it for today's headlines. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will be right back with our guests, Alex Murg and Charles Ivansick. All right, welcome back to Admit One. I'm your host, Jonathan Kubiak, and today we are fortunate enough to be joined by two current Notre Dame students, Alex Murg and Charlie Ivansick. Both of you are in your senior year, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Perfect. So we're going to kind of go into a little bit of your journey to Notre Dame, how you first got interested in the school, and talk a little bit about adjusting from high school into college. So I first wanted to ask both of you how you became interested in Notre Dame. Like, what got you to think about this school as a potential destination for each of you?
All right, so I have the more common story here on this campus, which is that my father went here and two of my brothers went here. So I've been going to football games yearly since I could walk and just fell in love with the school, being here so often. So of course I had to apply.
Yeah, I'd say football also definitely brought me to Notre Dame. My family is not a Notre Dame family, but is a huge football family. And my dad and mom usually travel around the country for different football games. And we saw the Notre Dame marching band play at one of the larger games, and I was kind of hooked from then.
So besides football, was there anything particular about any academic programs or anything else about Notre Dame that really made you feel like this is where you needed to be as a student?
Well, that definitely, I think, comes into why I chose Notre Dame. I think what initially attracted me to Notre Dame was probably football, but I think, yeah, every other aspect of Notre Dame, which I guess we'll probably get into later, is definitely what made me ultimately choose the school.
Gotcha. As far as specific programs and majors, though, what did you end up deciding on as a freshman when you came in? Did that change at any point while you were a student at Notre Dame? Any majors or minors that you picked up?
All right, so yeah, I started coming here. This is actually a little embarrassing, telling people I was going to major in international business. That is not a program at this university. It is a degree you can get it on your diploma, but it is not a program. So I ended up staying in business because I applied to the business school. Sort of worked my way through the different classes, the intro classes, decide what I think resonated most with me, and ended up on marketing. And then sort of on a whim, I signed up for a film class freshman year and loved it so much. I've always loved film, but I decided that I would pursue it as a major, and that's actually how I met Alex. So we've been friends ever since.
Are you a film major yourself, Alex?
I'm not. No, I took film because in high school, my high school required kind of like a film component for a lot of our classes, and it sounded like a really fun thing to join. And so Charlie and I did film class together and ended up doing a film project. As much fun. But no, I'm actually an econ major, econ and poli-sci double. I started out coming to Notre Dame just as an econ major. I grew up in a household that loved economics, and so I was very much introduced to econ from a young age and thought it was great. And then decided to add political science as a double major just because I felt like it was a really complementary major to econ. And it just kind of, one of them was a little more quantitative, the other was more qualitative, and I felt like it really kind of work both sides of my brain. So that's kind of what I did there.
Would you say that econ and poli-sci are pretty popular majors in Notre Dame? And Chuck, same to you as well. Would you say that marketing's pretty common? I mean, obviously not international business, but.
Yeah, so I would say marketing, I don't know on sheer numbers if it's less popular, but I would say just the most common business major I run into is finance, followed by accounting, followed by marketing. And then film is, if you are a double major in film, you probably have a marketing as your other major. They usually complement each other pretty well. But I would say that I could name maybe 4 or 5 kids with those two. There's very few kids that sort of do the school jump, because I'm in both the Mendoza College of Business and the College of Arts and Letters. So that's a little less common, but they definitely pair well together.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I do think statistically, econ and poli-sci, I think, are actually the 2 most common majors on campus. They're definitely within the College of Arts and Letters, so not unique at all, and the combination is also not unique. So I definitely, there's a few classes even today where I have a couple of students that are in every single one of my classes. So if that says anything about how many take the same classes, there you go.
So, I mean, with having, obviously that's kind of like program specific, but would you say that kind of like that experience of having a lot of the same people running through all of your same classes is pretty common, like kind of a small, tight-knit community?
Yeah, so I often describe Notre Dame as the world's biggest living room. It seems like everybody knows everybody. So I was actually just talking today with a kid who was in our intro film class together, Alex, and he asked me, like, when you first met me, what did you think of me? It was like part of a prompt for our class. And I was like, I don't remember when I met you. And he said, you were in the intro film class, right? So we've sort of been through it. If you don't meet them right away, like generally within your major, a few people that you just happen to run into all the time just sort of pop up. Like everybody has their common like classmates. So I've got 4 or 5 guys that have been in several of my film classes over the years. And it wasn't until I was in like smaller classes that I was like, oh, that guy is in all my classes. So I definitely think it's a super tight-knit community that only gets more so as you grow into your identity here.
Is that something that?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, I kind of like to think of it as the best of both worlds, where if you want to see people every single day, you can. It's pretty easy. But if there's someone that you maybe don't want to see every day, you're not forced to run into them. So I think it's not too small by any means. It's 8,000 undergrad, 10,000 total. So I kind of think it's a good mix, because if there's still 8,000 other students here, that's kind of a big, I still think that's pretty large.
Was that something that was important when you were considering other schools in high school, or was that something that just you kind of settled on?
For me, that was really important. I didn't want a school. Well, I did consider some larger schools, but ultimately I wanted to make sure I definitely wasn't going to a school where there's maybe 2,000 kids or something like that. And I also really didn't want a massive 40,000, 30,000 plus student body either. So yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that it really is right in that sweet spot. I have some friends at some smaller schools, and they do sort of say like run out of people to meet. But then some bigger schools where they sort of feel like there's a little bit less community. It's just such a large 40,000 people. It's hard to get them all under one sort of group. So absolutely. I think the 5,000 to 10,000 range was really the sweet spot for me personally, for having always being able to meet a new person, but not losing track of like your friends and the identity of the university.
Where else did each of you consider when you were seniors in high school?
All right, so my other brother, my oldest brother, went to school in Boston. He went to Boston University. So I was big on the Midwest and Boston. So I did 3 major Boston schools, Northeastern, BU, and BC. And then both the Loyolas, Notre Dame, Northwestern, and Villanova. And they were all great schools, but when I got into Notre Dame, I had to take the chance.
And you, Alex?
Yeah, mine's a little bit different. I kind of did athletics in high school, and so thought that I was kind of going to do more that route. So my college experience and applying was a little bit different initially, but ultimately I applied to a bunch of schools with large sports teams that also met the academic requirements that I was looking at. And also being from California originally, definitely I was pulled more towards West Coast schools, but really loved Notre Dame and then also loved UCLA. So that was kind of more my decision.
Outside of sports, what other extracurriculars did you guys do?
So I did a bunch of different things in high school. I used to row crew and also was on our basketball team. I participated in a program called Model United Nations, or Model UN, and founded our team's our school's mock trial team. Then did a bunch of community service and worked in, like, religion's also very important to me. So I worked in my local church and did a bunch of stuff like Bible studies and led the worship team and all that good stuff. I'm sure there's more stuff I did, but that's kind of like the sprinkle.
Just a short list, yeah.
I was also a rower in high school. I was a coxswain. And then extracurriculars, I would say, like, I was into film back then, so I was doing some stuff outside of school. But school-wise, I also did some service programs, so I think those are a real big resume builder. So anything you can do like that. I did a thing called Food Basket at our high school, where you collected donations. But yeah, outside of sports, I didn't have a ton of time, so I would say I would consider myself having done less extracurriculars than a lot of my peers here in high school.
Would you recommend for current high schoolers to get involved in similar types of programs, service type missions, sports,
Definitely.
obviously?
And I would also say, like, yeah, don't do it before do it before it's too late. Like senior year, there was a lot of extracurriculars that I wish I had started earlier or gotten into at all, and it just felt like it was too late.
I would also caution against, like, doing too much, because I also did, like, a bunch in drama and theater and did school musicals and all that kind of stuff. And there definitely became a point where I just didn't have enough literal hours in the day. And so I've told this story to Charlie, but I definitely felt like the Troy Bolton sometimes for, like, doing basketball, but then running to do the musical and just, like, going with full makeup to do basketball practice, then going in your basketball uniform to go to rehearsal. And so there was just a lot going on. And I think, I honestly think if I'd become a little more specialized into one, like, niche area, that would have probably been just as fine. And I probably would have had a little more sleep.
So with all those extracurriculars in high school, obviously time management is absolutely crucial. How would you advise current high schoolers to manage their time, and how did that change for you when you got to college?
You can start, Alex.
Okay. Yeah, I think I definitely think time management was something I learned kind of from middle school going through high school. And I'd just say high school and college are different. High school, I spent a lot of time in activities at certain times of the day. And so my day was very blocked out. And I think I just was very diligent in the certain time that I had to study or complete assignments. I completed those assignments and I studied. Like it wasn't, I put my phone away, put stuff away, and I really made sure to maximize my time. Whether that was even in, like, free time, like in the car, I did work. Like, there's times that you can do that you don't think are free, but you can actually, like, manage it well. So I think that was definitely something I learned in high school. But then the flip side is when you get to college, it really isn't as regimented or as, like, blocked out, I feel like, as high school was, at least for me. And so I think time management took a whole kind of different approach, where now it's like, well, let's find out a couple hours to block out to really get through this assignment or to read this reading well. And so I think still the discipline is kind of the same, but your approach is different.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that there is a lack of regimentation in college to some degree, which is good because it means you have more freedom. But for an 18-year-old kid who's never had that kind of freedom, it can also mean you fall behind on work or you don't prioritize things properly. So it's definitely a steep learning curve for the first semester, figuring out how much work can I do in X amount of time, and when are all my things due and stuff like that. But I think they generally do a good job of cushioning the blow. I think your first semester classes challenge you enough on your time management without being completely overwhelming. Just the way that our general courses are structured, especially geared towards first years.
Gotcha. We're just going to take a quick break. We'll be right back, guys. Thank you very much. All right, and welcome back to Admit One. We're here with Alex Murg and Charlie Ivansick, two current Notre Dame students, talking a little bit about their experience. I wanted to ask you guys, did either of you take advantage of any early decision or early action type of programs that Notre Dame might have offered during your application cycle?
So Notre Dame does do early action. We do not do early decision, which would lock you in. And that was actually a big factor in why I decided to put in the time to apply early, was that I could do it for a bunch of schools and not be locked in to committing early to Notre Dame. And then you also, of course, hear back early, which is great. So I would definitely recommend that route, just so that you generally have more time, or if you want to reapply or figure things out. I definitely recommend the early action route.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I also applied early, and I applied early to a few other schools that allowed the same kind of opportunity. I will say there's not all schools. Some schools get pretty finicky on, you can only do early decision and you can't apply early action to other schools. So I think you just need to determine, what bracket of schools, or like if Notre Dame is really a top choice for you. But I was always recommended, if it is one of your top schools, which it was for me, to apply early.
As far as the campus instruction, would you say that it's more oriented around learning for the sake of learning, or is it done with the intention of preparing you as best as possible for the emerging job market?
So I think it sort of depends on what you want out of it, but also sort of the school. I would say Mendoza has tons of resources for getting a job in business outside of, like, right after graduation. So that is definitely a huge part of the School of Business culture is learning for the sake of the workplace. So almost everything you learn is like, oh, and this is what you would do if you were doing it in the office, or this is how you would do it differently if you were doing it in the office. But then in my film classes, it's a lot of more learning for the sake of learning, like what is your opinion on this, not like what is going to get you a good grade. Like my teachers are very good at sort of picking out the kids who are just trying to make things sound good, and want you to actually engage with the material. So I think you're engaging with the material either way, but the motive changes sort of based on what it is.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I feel like Notre Dame has a ton of opportunities to get you connected in whatever you want to do after college. We have a very good alumni network, but then also we have an entire career development center that actively meets with all of the students. And I would feel, at least in my experience, it's been very helpful, whether that's building your resume, or they literally have headshot days every day. So there's a bunch of stuff that they do as a school to help you in the job market. Definitely. I think that's a major selling point of Notre Dame. At the same time, I think it also allows for a lot of intellectual honesty, which is why we have a core curriculum. So you're not just doing the classes within your major. So I had to take, a fine art class. So I took a film class, which was great. And I'm in right now a literature class, and I am not a literate that's not my kind of thing, but I'm learning a ton. And I think it's actually been super helpful for my just development as a person. So I feel like they kind of do both. And I think it's a pretty decent balance.
Is that core curriculum something that's spread across all 4 years, or is that more like centered on your freshman year and getting those general education requirements out of the way?
So it sort of depends on how you want to do it. They kind of leave it up to you. You just have to complete them before you graduate. So if you want to front load and just say, I don't know what I want to do with my life, let me take as many different classes as I can and figure it out, then you can get a lot of those core requirements out of the way. But if you have everything figured out and want to take more major classes your freshman year, you can also usually do that depending on the school.
Yeah, like I kind of thought I knew what I wanted to do and kind of have stuck with that throughout college. So I'm actually ending up college just doing all my general requirements, but that's definitely, I would say, not the norm. Also, a lot of us, most Notre Dame students study abroad junior year. I think it's like 70% of students, or maybe I think it's around 70, study abroad. And so a lot of the gen eds that you would take, you can also apply those when you go abroad.
Now, I know that there's an overwhelming amount to choose from, but each of you could take one thing from Notre Dame that you could say, I wish that this never changed about this university. This is perfect. I wish that every college could have this. What would it be?
Wow, that is a tough question. I'm gonna ponder on that for a moment. Alex, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, actually, there's probably a lot of things, but I think generally speaking, coming from Notre Dame, you go to anyone, I don't care if they're like old, young, came here before, it doesn't matter. If you went to Notre Dame or you're going to Notre Dame, there was an instant connection there. And I think that's extremely unique. I know that there's always like a college bond, but I've literally cold called or cold emailed everyone that has a Notre Dame affiliation, and I've never had someone turn me down. And I think that really speaks to just the kind of community and culture that Notre Dame creates, which is really that emphasis on family and that emphasis on community. So I think that's something I'd never want Notre Dame to change.
Yeah, the world's biggest living room, certainly. Everybody seems to know everybody and everybody's friendly. Yeah, I don't want to steal that one, but I do think that the sort of Notre Dame brand name carries a lot of weight everywhere you go. And that could be a bad thing, but I think Notre Dame's identity is so positive that I'm not like burdened by wearing a Notre Dame hat in public and having random people come up and say, do you go to Notre Dame? Because it's just such an identity that people always sort of single you out. And I just love that. I love that Notre Dame is a global name.
So each of you are seniors. You're looking back on your previous 4 years. What is one thing that you wish somebody told you before your first day of classes started at Notre Dame?
Get there early so you get the right seats. No, that's a bad one. But I would recommend that. I think I would say sort of what I said about extracurriculars in high school, which is like, don't start too late. You have 4 years here, and there are so many things I'm doing now that I wish I knew about or I wish I had committed to earlier. And so many friends I'm making now that I'm thinking, oh man, if I had only joined this club 3 years ago. So definitely seek out the university resources, and anything you want to do, try it out. I would say one of my most positive experiences here at Notre Dame, I joined the boxing team. I am not a fighter. I weigh 120 pounds. I'm 5'6", and I do not belong in a boxing ring for the life of me. But I ended up meeting so many wonderful people and falling in love with the program that I stuck with it for 7 months and fought in a tournament. So anything that you have even the slightest, I think that could be fun. Notre Dame, will make it more fun than you think, and you should try it as soon as possible.
I think that's a great one. I definitely would agree with that. I think for me, it would probably be start asking questions as soon as you get here, and don't be ashamed not to know things, and actually just embrace that. I think probably the biggest lesson I learned was that people here just want to help you and want to help you figure out what you're passionate about and want to find a career and a pathway in life that kind of fits with that passion. But they're only going to do that if you ask for it. So just really being introspective day one and being like, what do I like? And then just like Charlie said, actually joining things that you're interested in, because it's so crazy how many things how many different career paths and things that are out there that I didn't know existed coming from where I came from. And now that I know exist upon graduation, I think that was a lot in part of just asking people around, because there's so many people that are so smart and just kind and willing to help you. So that's what I would say.
We're just about out of time, but Alex, Chuck, I just wanted to thank you both so much for coming onto our program and sharing your stories and your experiences at such a wonderful school. So thank you both very, very much.
Thanks for having us. Go Irish.
Yeah, go Irish.